Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the June 2023 Compassion Chat. My name is Susan Marshall. I'm the author of Mom's Gone Missing, When a Parent's Changing Life Upends Yours, a member of the Wisconsin Alzheimer's Institute Board of Visitors, which Gina and I are going to talk about just briefly this evening, and your host for Compassion Chats. We have been doing these chats since March of 2021. And we started them to bring all kinds of people who have resources and knowledge and a heart for people suffering with cognitive decline, which covers a very broad spectrum, and to help this group of caregivers understand not only the disease and how it potentially may progress, but also how we can help those we love. This session, like all of them since March of 2020, is being recorded. So I would ask those of you who are with us live to please mute yourselves. We open it up at the end for questions, comments, stories, whatever you want to share with us. So all of that aside, I am so delighted, truly honored to welcome our guest this evening, Gina Green-Harris. Gina, I had to print out your background, your notes, because you got titles. Gina is the director of the Wisconsin Alzheimer's Institute Regional Milwaukee office. She is the director of the UW School of Medicine and Public Health Center for Community Engagement and Health Partnerships. I had to take a breath. We're going to talk about that community idea here in just a minute. And the director of the All of Us research program in Milwaukee, as well as the director of the Life Course Initiative for Healthy Families. Parenthetically, as an aside, Gina is also working on her doctorate degree. So good grief, my friend. Welcome. What an absolute joy. Truly it is to welcome you. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Well, thank you for having me. It is indeed an honor and a pleasure to be here. It brings me joy to just be in your presence and your company. And I am just so excited and thankful for this opportunity to serve in this capacity.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. We like to start, Gina, by getting a sense of who our guests are. So give us a little bit of your story, and in particular, what led you to do the work that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I am born and raised Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Actually, I'm raised in Milwaukee. I was born in Los Angeles, California. My parents made the sad decision and moved back here from Los Angeles when I was.
Hold on. Sad decision. Come on now.
Yeah. Well, I'll say winter is the reason I say that. But I was born in California. My dad was in the Marines, actually. And so born, and then they moved here, but they moved back home probably before I was 1. So it didn't work. But anyway, long story short, I was raised in Milwaukee. Great parents, great family, and grew up in the inner city of Milwaukee, or right off of 41st and Capitol. So I had this real take of city, but I tell the story, and I think it's really relative to who I am today. 2 things. One, my family was one of the first families to cross 27th Street on North 27th to cross Capitol to live in a predominantly white neighborhoods. We were like the 3rd Black family on our block. So context there, getting to know neighbors who didn't look like me. So that was really a really great opportunity for me to grow into who I am. And then the second part about my life is just my grandmother, who is just my most favorite person in the whole world. She really taught me about advocacy by way of advocating for me as a kid who was really loquacious, but also had some challenges growing up with some attention deficit issues. But really helped me because she was an advocate for me. And unfortunately, she died when I was 16, prematurely, I say, of throat cancer. So, and one of the commitments I made to my grandmother was that I would do the same for her, what she did for me. And so I've always been a person who have led my life to really be a person to help underdogs. But before my grandmother died, she also presented us with legacy, and her legacy was education. She raised her children as a janitor, and they grew up. My mom became a graphic designer, and my aunt became a nurse. But my grandmother went back to school at the age of like 45 and got her undergraduate degree and wanted to leave education as a legacy for her grandchildren. And so, again, I just grew up in a space where people really took care of me and advocated for me. And I felt that that is what my gift from God is to pass that mantle was passed to me to advocate. So how I got into this is just growing up. It took a village to raise me. If you could believe that, I think you can. And I just believe that being part of that village, I am now in the role of creating villages for people and really being in the space of advocating. And so I have just tried to do my best to live my life as a servant and as a servant to help our communities grow, whether it be in the inner city, the suburb, wherever that takes me. And whatever disease it takes me into, whatever area, it really is about making a difference in the lives of the people that I meet.
You know, and what you say, Gina, is it's poignant, certainly. But when you think about the field of cognitive decline, and we've talked about this a number of times, the two of us, but how we lose people before they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we think of that as we lose these loved ones? And I shared, the love that you had for your grandmother, similar story for me. She died when I was 25, and inconsolable. Right. But we lose part of ourselves. Yeah. At the same time, we're losing these people. So it becomes very personal. It gets confusing. Mm-hmm. So let's talk a little bit about where all of this is going. There's a whole bunch of research going on. There are studies. I want to talk to you or have you share with us your knowledge of some of those things. And then how can we, as caregivers, either encourage participation amongst our loved ones or perhaps even get involved ourselves?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, Susan. And, to be honest with you, there's so many.
Knowledge is good.
There's so many.
I've got Siri here acting up and I don't know why.
Siri said knowledge is good and she's right.
Okay.
Okay. That is so bizarre. Computers.
Well, anyway. What I was going to say though, is that, what's interesting about now with, cognitive challenges, whether it be particular to dementia or other, types of brain disorders or whatever the case may be, memory issues. The interesting thing is that there's a ton of studies out there that people can participate, but more importantly, there are also new knowledge that is out there about the trajectory, right? So I remember when I first started doing this work in Alzheimer's, which I think was a godsend. Again, as I said before, when I started doing the work in Alzheimer's, I actually came from a background of doing HIV work. And what I told Dr. Sager when he hired me was that HIV and Alzheimer's are very similar. Similar in that at that point, there was no cure. There was nothing for those folks who actually were in those trenches of dealing with those diseases. However, since 2008, the trajectory is so different. While there still is no cure and we've got the new interventions that we're studying for Alzheimer's disease, but the reality is that as caregivers, the resources have improved over these last several years. But what I mean by that is due to the research and the changes of how we are looking at Alzheimer's, how we're looking at cognitive impairment, how we're looking at cognitive decline has changed significantly in research. And also, it gives us even more hope. So, for example, in 2008, there was not the discussion of social engagement. There was not the discussion of how bringing your loved one to communities that are safe for them, where they can be welcomed, actually can help their trajectory. It can help them stay home longer. It can actually help their mood, right? Those things were not things we were thinking of because we were so in the scientific world of being in those laboratories looking for these genetic factors, which are important, but we're learning. And what we've learned the last 10, 15 years is that the genetic factors are really important, but there are also these other subset of factors that are equally important. And they are non-pharmacological, they are non-genetic, they are how we function as humans. And I think that is something that we have overlooked for for several years. And so I'm excited about that part, being that I'm not really necessarily a genetic scientist, but I do believe in community active engagement and using that as a resource, as a tool, because to me, that is really accessible to caretakers. And so that is go ahead, Susan.
I'm sorry. My brain went in two different directions as I've been listening to you, Gina. As you know, this is what happens. Part of me, say more about what those social engagement factors are.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. So early on, we isolated people who had dementia, meaning at least in communities, that were unsure of this trajectory and cognitive decline. They would put folks in rooms. They would, have them just sit in a wheelchair of sort and leave them by themselves. But that has changed. Socially, they're doing things like choruses. They're doing things like horseback riding groups. They're doing things like just taking their loved ones out to dinner even, and really giving them social engagement encounters. Churches are having services for people who have cognitive decline. There are so many facets to say that in public spaces, we have dementia-friendly communities now, where we are actually making sure that when you're going and doing your banking, you have a good social experience, right? You're making sure that we are embracing people, understanding this trajectory better, understanding these cognitive impairments better, and really bringing opportunity for those folks to be socially engaged in every setting. Senior centers are now having spaces for folks. So it's not just the people that are in long-term care facilities that are having places for people who have cognitive issues. It is across the spectrum of community. And we're really making sure that, one of the things we do with our community advisory board and our chorus in particular, our Alzheimer's chorus is a group of people who come together with their caretakers to not only sing, but to get resources. But we offer them respite. We take them out and we take them places where they can actually relax and enjoy and feel a part of community. That is really important.
Absolutely. And I can appreciate, now I'm listening to you as a caregiver thinking, but I'm self-conscious. Mm-hmm. I don't always know how to talk to my loved one. I don't know what they're going to do. Mm-hmm. I don't want to be embarrassed, nor do I want to bring harm. How can I gradually sort of stick my toe in that water?
That's a really great question. I'm going to go back to my good old standby of education. One of the biggest things that we can do, and this is what I always say, there's no perfect way to bring anybody in community. I'm troubled in community sometimes, but what we have to really do as caretakers is educate ourselves on what actually is, what is the trajectory? How is cognitive changes happening? What do they look like? How do they manifest? And what are safe spaces to take folks? So let me put it out here this way. And by safe spaces, I don't mean places that will bring them harm, but what I mean is safe spaces for your loved one to actually feel comfortable too. For example, we know that people who have cognitive concerns often do not do well in large, crowded places. We know that going in. So if we want to take them out for dining, we want to take them out for dinner, we need to think about what time that needs to happen. Not that you can't take them out for a great dinner at your most favorite restaurant, but let's think about what time that should be. I would encourage you not to do it at peak hours. I would encourage you to think about not doing it on a Saturday, but think about where those restaurants have maybe more opportune space. And then also talking to that restaurant in advance to say, I've got a loved one who is having some cognitive challenges. Are there quieter places in your restaurant you can seat us, right? But it's okay to be comfortable to do that. And I think that is some of the things that we get when we are educating ourselves to feel more comfortable around this issue.
Well, and what I particularly love about what the example you just gave, Gina, is that's how we can begin developing the network.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
We talked about this at length last week. What is thinking about it in the space of cognitive decline, rapid, slow, whatever that is, What's a network in that context?
Yep. So network for me, again, cognitive decline is just that, cognitive decline. And usually it's over time. One of the things, as I'm saying, as we educate ourselves about what is going on with this cognitive decline, whether it be dementia, whatever the case may be, it is important to get information early, to learn about this trajectory as soon as possible. That's the first part. The second part is to identify people who you surround yourself with to make sure that as you're on this journey, they are there to support you. And this is a network in that context. And so I want to be clear, all networks are not family, right? So what we know about health caregivers across the spectrum, this goes beyond cognitive, Alzheimer's, whatever. I'm talking about caregivers now. I'm going to talk about general caregiving for anyone. What we know is that families start off as this support system, networking system, but not all families can do it. And your family may not be, your siblings may not be your best network because there's this close proximity of what has happened in past, what is not capable now, and in the future, we don't even know how that would look. But what I say is to identify external people, your friends, your professional colleagues who have really great information in this area, and whosoever your community is. A community is that larger, that's that third rung where you get to know people and you get to have access to these people. Now, you don't need them all at the same time, but what you do need to do is develop a list or develop some kind of what we used to call them Rolodex back in the day, a Rolodex of when you are in that situation, you can zip it to Z and call Zany Zah and say, hey, I need you to talk to me about power of attorney because I'm in this place or I'm going to be there. But I would also encourage you to, when you start thinking about these people in advance, so that when you're ready for them, they are ready for you. That's a network to me. And so it's layers of people. It doesn't have to be family. It can be, but you also have to compartmentalize where they're going to land in your network. Because as we know, we all have these networks for whether it be our professional for work or our friends to go traveling with, or whatever we utilize our networks for. We need that same concept when we are caregiving.
I love that. So let's go to a place that stops many caregivers in the tracks. We know that one of the very first responses or reactions to changed behavior, particularly cognitively changed behavior, is denial.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's just getting old. Mom's had a stressful week, right? So help we caregivers, potential caregivers, right? Including, how do we get past that very first, not a big deal?
Yeah, you know what? I think one of the things that I encourage people to do, because you're absolutely right, Susan, we see things, we brush them under the carpet. We kind of like, that's just it. Nothing there. But what I say to people is, first, be comfortable with what you're seeing. Learn how to be comfortable with what you're seeing. And if you still don't believe it, start journaling. Journal what you're seeing. Write it down. It doesn't have to be a pretty fancy journal. It could be a whiteboard. It could be your sticky notes. I don't care. But as you start seeing behaviors, start writing them down. And the reason I say write them down is because you're starting to figure out your own patterns yourself. And you can't run from paper. You can't run from things that are written, believe it or not. We tried so hard, but when it's in writing and you're putting it down, what you notice are a few things. One, you notice how often you're seeing things. Number two, you're writing down soberly what you're seeing, and then you start to really consciously think about those things. And then the third thing it does is it starts giving you these light bulbs in your head of remembrance of when you've seen them somewhere else and things that you've been hearing, whether it be media, whether it be information you've read, and it provokes you to, if nothing else, start learning about it, right? So, in doing so is safe, right? Because it's your notes. And so no one's telling you this. No one's feeding your head with junk. It's really you, yourself, and this information. And so you have no choice, because this is how we're wired, to start processing it. Now, what you do with it and how long that takes, again, that's another question. But at least it will get us out of some of our denial. And then that's another thing you can do. Take these notes to your providers. Even if it's not the provider or the person in whom you're seeing these behaviors in, find a trusted someone to say, hey, I've been jotting this down for the last 3 weeks. Here's what I've noticed. And this is happening more and more and more. What do you think about this? A trusted, credible source. And then you start really understanding. Now, again, this doesn't mean that because you're seeing these behaviors that you go from 0 to 100, but it does mean it warrants you to, once you become, the more educated we become, the more engrossed we become in understanding, I think our fear and our absolute denial, it dissipates. And what that does is it opens up opportunity for us to ask more questions and to really be cognizant that we've got to do something.
You know, I so love the way you described that, because it really, it's a process of cataloging, however you do it, as you said, but it also provides time to digest what you're seeing, to think about what it may mean, what it may not mean. So it's kind of like the counter to denial is absolute overreaction. Oh my goodness, this has never happened before. The world is ending. I got to do something now.
Yeah.
And the act typically adds tension and energy in ways that aren't always helpful.
Right. Exactly. Because it's kind of like when we just kind of let stuff drift in the air, what happens is that we stay inside of our heads. The other good part about writing things down is it gets it out of your head. It takes us out of our own mind. And our mind plays tricks on us, whether we like it or not. The fact is, what happens when you keep things in your head, and this is something I can tell you, because this is something I can testify to. I start writing my own narratives. I start writing my own stories and trajectories. And they can be as false as the sky being yellow, gray, blue, purple. But in my mind, it's true, because I haven't validated it. And I've only tried it against myself and really my inner self. But when we start writing things down and looking at them, it gives us a total different lens, and it releases all this out of our brain. And that actually can reduce our tension and take that out of it, but give it a place. And now it's compartmentalized somewhere else where I can validate it. And that's really important.
Oh, it's powerful. Oh, it's phenomenal. Now, that leads my brain to go, okay, I'm thinking about my network. I'm starting to sort of jot things down that I'm seeing. At this point, I'm not yet making meaning of it. But there are people squawking in my ear, looking over my shoulder, siblings, community people, friends of loved ones. You're not really seeing that. So talk about, how do I not only allow that, because it's going to happen, I can't control it, but how do I help me not get crazy because of it?
Yeah, oh man, that part. So, interestingly enough, I have learned, in watching caretakers and watching myself even as a caretaker, and I can give a really great example of when my dad doesn't have dementia, doesn't have any kind of cognitive impairment. However, he is elder, and he had pancreatic cancer. And so I was a primary caregiver for him in his recovery. And I've got 2 younger brothers, younger, that are like 20 years my junior, younger. And so it was amazing, because I was primary caregiver, and I would say to them, things about how my dad was recovering, and like he wasn't, they come over, Dad, get up, get moving, get rolling, do this, do that, do that. I'm like, no, this is not how recovery works. Our dad is 70 plus years old. He's gonna take time. You cannot do that. He should be further along. He should be doing this. And I'm like, wait, hold it. Here's what I need you to understand. And here are the facts about what happens with someone who has pancreatic cancer and they're just coming out of surgery and they're recovering. And here's these processes that that he has to follow. So I would give them just didactic information. I knew that wasn't going to work. I knew it wasn't going to be enough. because they were in their 20s and they thought, they're Superman, and he's still their Superman in their heads. And I'm saying, no, listen, this is how we're going to work on this. And so the next step was to have them actually come by and sit with my dad while I wasn't there. I go run errands and I'd say, you come over here and I want you to sit with dad. And then they got to see him. They actually got to experience how he cannot do something, right? And that's the challenge. It's getting our loved ones to understand that we're not making this stuff up. You're zooming in and out. I need you to spend time. I need you to spend quality time to see the manifestation of what I'm talking about. And that in itself got them to start saying, oh, we start to understand this. Okay. Oh, got it. So as it's related to people who have cognitive challenges or cognitive impairment or cognitive decline, however you want to describe it, ask your loved ones to say, hey, you know what? I've got a really busy 2 days. Can you come over and spend some time with mom, dad, whomever it is, sibling, whatever? Can you come spend some time with him? And I just need you to do this. And by the end of that second day, they're generally kind of saying like, oh, I see what you're saying. Oh, while I was here, she hid things under the couch. You don't say. While I was here, she accused me of stealing her money. No, not you. While I was here, this is what I understand. She wouldn't eat for me. You gotta be kidding me. Where have I heard those things? So it's putting people in those situations in a very innocent way, but letting them experience it too. And then you start having honest conversations about what makes you so uncomfortable about this. And acknowledging that, you know what, I'm uncomfortable doing this too, because no one ever told me that I would be doing this kind of caretaking for my elder, for my mom, my dad. No one ever told me that. And I'm uncomfortable because I'm putting myself as a daughter into a role that I never expected to be for my parent, right? Which can create some situations that are challenging. For instance, some of us have to change undergarments. Some of us have to, really go in and do some things, bathing and washing. That's not something our community is always comfortable with, right? So it's okay to acknowledge that and say, how do we get past that? So those honest conversations about what makes you so afraid of this? What's your fear? And then trying to address them and seeking professional help to do that is always an option. So those are just a few things I think families can try, but I promise you facts happen, but experience is always better than facts. And then really addressing those fears, addressing those challenges that our loved ones will have. But I think at the end of the day, Sue, we have to be honest to say, this is true. Everybody's not cut out to be a caregiver. So we've got to figure out who's going to do what, because some people are just going to pay the bills, and that's okay, because that takes the stress off you. And some people are just going to drop off food at the door, and that's okay, because you don't have to make groceries. So we've got to really meet people where they are in this journey and accept them for where they are, and not put those expectations that we have on them or on ourselves.
Well, and first of all, I'm thinking, where were you, Gina, 7 years ago? I so could have used this advice way back then. But I think about, and certainly I'm listening to what you're doing, thinking, oh, geez, I could have. But when families are distributed geographically, as many of them are today, how would you adapt this come over advice? That's part A. And then part B is, we know that on this trajectory of decline, it can be extraordinarily uneven. One day, just like they've been for the last 55, 80 years, the next day, whoa, unless you have that almost linear experience, right? Sequential experience, you may not ever see it.
Right. Yeah.
How would you maybe adapt the advice you just gave and to a geographically distributed family that has different opinions about what's happening?
Absolutely. That's one of the biggest challenges, I think, right now. And that definitely was a challenge during COVID, because no one could travel. And the caregiver was stuck in that minute. And I use the word stuck, not in a negative, but just quite frankly, in the trenches. They were there all the time. And those other folks were peripheral. So I think one of the things that we have learned to do, again, I utilize technology, quite frankly, I'm like, can you give us a call? Call mom every day. Let's give a call. Let's do a Zoom call every other day, every day. So you can, again, to keep you connected, to keep you in the loop, really using technology to your advantage. And then I would also acknowledge that, people take vacations all the time now. Can one of your stops be here so that I can take a break? And then again, that will get them the experience as well. But I think what can really happen is, again, thinking about their experience may not be in that home. It may not be that direct contact with the person who's on the journey. However, their role, it may be to work with the resources or work with those care organizations to get the care to the house. That in itself is an experience as well. So again, it's giving them the component of care, a component of care support that they can do that may not require them to be in the house. So they may, to your point, Sue, they may never see our loved one go through the actual transitions and the changes. But if they are engaged with, let's say, getting the power of attorney stuff together, if they're responsible for making sure that they are connected to family care, for example, making sure if we know we've got to transition them to home health aid, having them to do those things. If they know that we know there's going to be some long-term care involved, having those external people take care of those responsibilities, I guarantee you they're going to call you going like, oh my God, I didn't know this was so difficult. Why do I have to call 6 different people? Why do I have to talk to 21 different? I told this same story to 7 different people. That in itself can give them they can then imagine if they're going through this externally, what you're going through internally, right? That's really, so everybody can have a different lane. And again, it may take that, but then also again, asking, I've been caring for a loved one for the last year. I haven't had a break. I haven't had a leave. Can you please come for 6 days? Can you come for 3 days even? And it's really interesting because this is something that I have to say to the caregivers on this line. When you invite your loved ones to come, let them do it. Do not get in the way. And what I mean by that is that you ask them to come 6 days, but after the 3rd day, you're returning because you feel like, oh, I know they're messing it up and I got to get back. Or your guilt is overshadowing you. You got to release some of that stuff. You've got to trust that process, right? So give yourself the ability and the opportunity to breathe, to step back, to share those opportunities. And I think it's also fair to say, hey, I'm the primary caregiver. I'm going to own that, but I am going to ask you to do these responsibilities. So that may help.
Oh, it's phenomenal. Are you kidding me? That's great. It suggests, maybe it screams, there is groundwork to be done as you're defining who that network is. And one of the things we talked about, Gina, that I wanted to make sure we talked about this evening is learning to trust each other, learning to trust yourself, and providing a means to get out the fear.
Yes.
We don't want to say that word because that puts up our walls and we defend. I'm not afraid. You just don't know what you're talking about. No. Let's talk. So how would we sort of start those conversations without getting to, well, you're not the boss of me.
Exactly. You don't tell me what to do today. It's a tough question, but I think what happens in all families, and I shared this too, is that, birth order is real in our families. I don't, and we often find ourselves, though we have birth order and we can get them all, discombobulated and messed up. At the end of the day, they stand true. They do. They stand true. And so what we have to do is think about, in the context of caregiving, what role is birth order playing, right? So the expectation is that the oldest will do this work. Well, the oldest is maybe not have the capacity and or the desire to do that. You got to give people the release to say what they can and cannot do. That's really important. The second thing is to own the relationships that siblings share. Siblings share special relationships, which means to say, and I'm going to say this, you guys, it's a tough conversation. But we got to let go of stuff that happened when we were 10, 12, 15, 21, 30, and 40. You didn't do this for me. You said that. You were always mom's favorite anyway. Why don't you do all the work? That is not going to get us where we need to be. So what we have to do is take off some of those old things. And I hate to say this, but sometimes stepping outside of our feelings is what's going to help us become able to be good caretakers as a family. And so whether or not you thought mom thought that I was the favorite kid or not, that's not what we're here to discuss today. Because I could say I thought every sibling thinks the other parent thinks the other kid is the favorite. I mean, it just is what it is. And so, but unless you're the youngest, then you know you're the favorite. So that's kind of real. But the reality is that's not the point of all this. We have to say and have honest conversation. And I encourage you to think about this. If there's any bad blood between you and your siblings, I want you to really hear me. You know, anything else I say today, I want you to step back, think about your loved one and where they would like to see your relationship be and work on it from that perspective. Don't put yourself in it. Think about it from your loved one's perspective. And quite frankly, if it's a parent and you are a parent, think about how you would want your children to respond to this situation. And those are things that you can start building a platform on. It doesn't mean it's going to be perfect, but you can have these family honest conversations, get the elephants out the room and start building. And that's how trust actually can be reestablished, because it's one increment and one step at a time. It's one question at a time. It's one honest moment of meeting at a time. And you know what? I love it. There's this t-shirt out. I don't know if you guys know it. It says, "I'm sorry I was late, but I really didn't want to come." And I love that t-shirt. I swear it's my story on many things, but that's exactly it. And it's okay to voice that and say, you know, I just really didn't want to be here, but I know I have to be. And I know we've got to work together. That's honest. Let's figure out, how do we do this? This doesn't mean we're going to be best friends. It doesn't mean you're going to be my first person in my network. I may never call you first, but I know that you are my sibling. I know we share parents, and our parents would want you here. So let's do it. Even if you've done something egregious, this is the blessing and curse of being a parent, is that even if my children irritate me and do something that I don't like and do something against me, I still want them. I still want them around. I still want to love them. I'm still going to forgive them. And I still want them to be in my presence. That's how we have to look at that, and respect the parent or the person in whom we're caregiving for. Respect what they will want to do. And again, opening up and saying, hey, I really know we need to work on trust. And here's some small steps we can take. Small steps like just having a phone call. Small steps like calling and informing them of what's going on, not in emergency situations only, but maybe agreeing that we'll do updates weekly or bi-weekly, right? Doesn't have to be on the phone. We got too much technology now. It could be something where you guys have a group chat, but it's a start. And then you start building on that. And then also, I will say this to the primary caregivers, opening yourself up, even in those chats, to say, hey, I've got a lunch appointment on Thursday. Can anybody step in for me? Asking for help is one of the worst things we do not do as caregivers. You've got to ask for help. There are no mind readers. And I know we want everybody to read our mind and see our struggles. Don't they see me martyring? Don't they see me? Well, I'm sorry, they may not. And that's okay to ask for help and acknowledge that.
I love that framing. I mean, it really takes, almost requires that we get over ourselves before we're going to help anybody else get over whatever it is that they're carrying, right? And it brings me to, I don't remember if we talked about this, like, but you know what? I'm really not interested in being the adult right now. Right? It goes back to, can't you see what I'm doing here? No, they really can't. Or may, because of where they are, simply will not. So how do you deal with that? Right?
Yeah, but you know what? This is what, there's some folks who may not, but then there are the folks, and this is what I think I'm learning as I continue on these journeys. One of the things that we've been looking at is, how does this caregiving piece work? And this is a very, non-scientific thing. But one thing people who are in those trenches do, again, we create this protective piece around ourselves and around the people we're caregiving for. So while we think, because I'm doing everything, I'm doing this and I'm doing that, and I. And so the people who might want to step in, when they say, hey, I'll do this for you. No, I'll do it myself. No, I'll do it myself. But then we project on them to say, no one's helping me. So we've got to also have a responsibility and accountability as caretakers to say, am I really opening myself up for support? Or am I closing myself because of my own, again, staying in my head, believing that no one wants to help me? That's one piece. So think about that. The second piece is maybe there's just somebody who just can't get past their denial and they just absolutely are not ready. That's okay. Let them not be ready. Do not take it personal. Find a person in your network who can fill that space until they're ready. Because when you think about it, and this is the other thing I always say, when you think about it, you weren't always ready either. There's just some of us, and this is what I say to most of my primary caretakers. You were chosen because you could do this in this moment. It didn't mean that you were superpowers or anything, but you were someone who was able to push past your fears, push past your doubts, push past your wanting to deny and denial and actually get in the trenches. Everybody's not designed like that. And everybody can't do it at this time. Now, keep in mind, this might just be your season for now, because the next season, that other person may need to come and take over because you may not even have the capacity, even though you believe it, see it, and understand it. It may be something where you just don't have the capacity. So you don't want to close that door. You want to meet people where they are. And you want to let them kind of continue to keep them engaged by information sharing, education, giving them good education, and really helping them to see why their presence is essential. Because that's the other thing. A lot of people don't even know why they should be there. What will I do? The perception is, when you think about it, what's the perception we think about people who are on this trajectory? One, they're incapacitated, which is not true. Two, they have no real social engagement, which is not true. Three, they are, don't know anything or remember null about me, which also is not true. So we have to rewrite that narrative to say what can happen in this space. And then I'll tell you the last thing that I have learned and talk about is the ability to find a new normal. Finding new relationship with your loved one on the trajectory. Finding those minutes of delight. Finding those moments, even though they may not be fluid, they still can be themselves. They just may not know you, but learn them in their new self. Build a new relationship with those folks. That in itself, again, reducing that fear, creating a new space, a new opportunity to share will reduce your anxiety as well as those who said, I'm not doing this. I don't want to be a part of it, but they can do opportunity. Imagine the person who doesn't want to do anything in the home, but willing to take their loved one to a chorus because it's a social, because it gives them a sense of, oh, that's something we used to do growing up. We used to go to concerts together. So, I can do this. Identify opportunities for them to be a part.
I love that. I mean, what you are talking about right now at the very core is absolute compassion for self, for loved ones, for others, for the network.
Yeah.
And practicing in very practical ways. I want to shift slightly, Gina, and talk about community. We know we've got a lot of research on a defined population. We don't have a lot of research on multiple groups of people and different backgrounds and different experiences and all of that kind of stuff. Let's talk about how can we encourage people to, continue to educate themselves in relationship to those who may be different but have interest. Secondarily, is there a way, and this might be premature, tell me if it is there a way to encourage people to engage with providers in the Wisconsin Alzheimer's Institute either to get involved in a study, to sponsor someone, to learn about, again, part of that education, but really going beyond education to engagement?
Absolutely. That's an excellent question. We know, quite frankly, the data shows that for whatever reasons, right, we know that it's not specifically only genetic. We know it has a lot to do with how we are politicized, how we are socially, where we grew up, the development of the Alzheimer's dementia. And for that reason, we know that people of color, particularly African Americans, like 2 times more likely. Our Hispanic community is 1.5 times more likely to develop some form of Alzheimer's or related dementia. We know that that's what the data shows us. We also know, as you pointed out, the research, unfortunately, less than 4%, I'll say, total research participants are people from various backgrounds and communities. And that 4% is really made up of our Hispanic and our African American communities. We won't even talk about our sovereign nations or our Native community because in our indigenous populations, because they are not even on the radar, unfortunately, at this point. They're less than 2% total, which is definitely something we need to think about. But what I will say is that, how do we get those folks more involved? And when we think about community, I think one of the biggest ways to get people from diverse communities involved is, one, to really ask them to be involved, create programs and service delivery models that are designed specifically for them. And what I mean by that is that, we often try to do cookie cutter approaches to care and to care services. But what we have to recognize is that, yes, I say this all the time, Alzheimer's and dementia does not discriminate against who it comes to. It doesn't matter. You're at risk of diabetes. You're at risk. You've got high stress. You've got head trauma. You've got all that. That's just classic. But what we do know is how to get people to message that and understand those messages. That has to be something we translate into what communities can hear and can understand. So, for example, if you're looking at communities of color that are living in high pollution areas or populations that we know are living in poor quality index, communities that don't have healthy food stores, right? Those kinds of things. We know that they're more high risk. And so it's really talking to them about, not just don't eat fat food, don't eat, fast food, don't eat. No, it's really saying, here's some healthier options and here's why these options. And it's not that the communities, let us not presume and assume those communities don't want to eat healthy. That's the other messaging. We often victimize or make them, we often make the communities that are burdened the most, the reason for their burden. It's not that they're choosing, and maybe that they don't have access. And so we have to really think about getting better access for better choices. Because I know a lot of folks, I don't know anybody who wakes up and says, I really want to feed my kids junk food every day. I don't think that's a reality, right? Or I just want to eat until I'm overweight. I don't think that's a reality, right? It really is something that happens. And I will say this too, while we're talking about under-resourced communities, we have to think about our rural communities, quite frankly. And those are typically not African Americans, especially in the state of Wisconsin. Those are our white Caucasian communities that are rural, that don't have access either. And that's an oxymoron because of farms, right? So it's like, where and how do we address this? But what we have to do is really start thinking about humans and on the context of caring for humans. And I also think we have to start thinking about community in a different context. So right now, today in 2023, the term community has changed so much. Community right now, when I say, okay, I want to do a research project in a community, most people think that's in a Black space. No, we got to get back to the old terminology of community. If you guys, when I grew up, community meant everybody. It meant anybody on your block, anybody in your geographic radius of like 4 or 5 miles. And it also meant the city you live in. That was community, right? It was this embracing of all. It didn't base on race. It based on you being geographically connected. And that's community that we need to get back to, in my opinion. And as far as research is concerned, I think it really is about making sure we've been able to increase our research number. And yes, there are ways in which people can actually help provide support to get this work done. We definitely always need opportunities to educate. But when I say educate, now I'm talking about campaigns where we're actually in communities, giving good, credible information and bringing them into the fold by going out there and meeting them where they are. If it means us, I would love someone who would like to help us sponsor a fruit truck to do nothing but go pass out fruit to kids in the community during the summer. It's a summer, the kids are out of school. They need fresh fruit. We could drive around and do fresh fruit and talk about brain health. We could go around to families who have this desire to really want to learn more about how to understand air quality index. That's a great way to sponsor and to involve them in potential research studies. That is how we have to do it in our communities. And that could be rural, that could be urban, but it's definitely something that we need sponsorships for. We definitely need people who want to give to those folks. And then we can ask people to help, thinking about our chorus. We definitely want to always take those chorus members because on those respite trips, but I also want to build for the folks that our chorus program is at no cost to the community, but it also is a program. It's not just coming together to sing. We do concerts. We go to nursing homes. We go to skilled facilities, and we do these concerts for these folks who can't get out. But more importantly, we also provide those families with resources. So it's like a support group in itself. It's a family. We need to support that. When we're online, which we are, there's a cost for that. We could ask people to sponsor. People who want to love on us can sponsor the chorus. They can sponsor the singing. They can sponsor the coach bus line. So there are things that can happen. And those folks, by the way, most of them are involved in our research as well. So it's really a way to do this.
Well, and what you bring to this, Gina, which is why I'm so honored that you joined us this evening, is the humanity, the genuine people energy and concern and fun.
Yes.
We think about research and the white lab coat, right? And the flip chart. And it's like, no. Let's be around each other and learn about and for one another.
Yeah, because you know what? And I always say this, and I do, Sue. I tell people, this is what I say in my presentations. And I think people are finally getting used to me saying it. One, I am human first, and I still bleed red. And I'm brown third. My race is in there, but that's not, you see that first, but don't see that first. See me as a human being first, then recognize that if I get cut, it's going to be the same red blood that you get cut. So we're more alike than we are different. Let's build on our likeness. Let's build on our similarities. Let's build on our humanism and think about how do we broaden that context? Again, back to what community really meant before. Many of us remember, I don't know about you guys, but I remember sharing sugar. I remember flour coming from different houses. I remember potatoes being passed. I remember all those things. And this is me living in a white community. So it wasn't because they thought we were poor. It was because it was the way we did business for community. I remember community dinners. I just remember those things. And so those are the things that I would love for us to get back to.
Well, and you are perfectly placed. God knows what he's doing. And you, my friend, he's got just exactly where you need to be. We have got just 5 minutes left. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we're chatting up. I want to open it up for anyone who has an additional question, perhaps a comment, a story you'd like to share before we release Gina back to her world.
Sorry about that. Yes.
No worries. I don't see any takers to our opening this up. So I will simply conclude, Gina, saying thank you so much for the work you do, for the human you are.
Thank you.
I know that we are going to continue the discussions. Yes. We are going to gather to build communities, to open up the information that we have, and really to comfort each other as we make our way through what are incredibly challenging times.
Absolutely. It's been my pleasure. And I am so thankful. I don't take it lightly. And whatever I can do to help, I am here to serve. So I appreciate this opportunity and look forward to our continued just relationship, friendship, and just working relationship. And Again, thank you for having me as a guest on your show. It's been my pleasure.
Absolutely. I want to remind everyone here and who will see this later, this is being recorded. It will be live, not live, it'll be recorded and archived at susanamarshall.com. Go there. You can see everybody that we've had since March of 2021. So Gina, bless you. Thank you again.
Take care. Bye-bye, everybody.